What is up, fellas? We are back for another UFC predictions video, this time for UFC Fight Night Perez versus Taira. I'm going to start putting all my picks on the board to save you the time. There's a. I, just looks like a bunch of schizophrenic ramblings. Also, that monitor glare is actually fucking brutal. But I'm going to break down each fight on the card, give you my predictions and reasoning for said predictions. Let's jump right into it, fellas. Kicking us off at featherweight, Melquizel Costa versus Shaylin Nerdy and Mbeke. Fellas, I'm hitting you with a dog out of the gate. I'm going with Shaylin Nerdy and Mbeke here in this fight just because I don't really trust Melquizel Costa all that much. Not that Shaylin Nerdy and Mbeke has exactly an incredible resume himself, but I think there's some intangibles that I like and prefer uh, in Shaylin Nerdy and Mbeke as opposed to Melquizel Costa. Um, Nerdy and Mbeke, good power in his hands, very dense guy. He packs a punch. His boxing's not the best. I would say he's probably a worse, less technical striker than Melquizel Costa, but he makes up for that by being a fucking absolute brick shithouse. He was able to drop Steve Garcia in their fight. Both of these guys are coming off of a loss to Steve Garcia. Um, Melquizel Costa's loss, much more brutal and horrific, I've got to say. I believe Steve Garcia finished Nerdy and Mbeke with a kick to the body or something like that. Melquizel Costa was shooting for a takedown on the referee for about 45 seconds. That's another reason why I don't trust him too much coming into this fight. I feel like his confidence might be a little bit low here in this fight. And another thing I think Nerdy and Mbeke could take advantage of, I believe I have it written down here. Wrestle. I think he can get takedowns on Melquizel Costa, and I think if he does get takedowns on Melquizel Costa, he's more of a jiu-jitsu guy, and he does kind of like to play guard, and I kind of like that if we have a short, stocky, powerful guy who can power out of positions and just kind of control the fight, similar to an Alatong Haley, how he beat fuck, I forget the guy's name he fought. Dynamic kickboxer, kind of like Melquizel Costa, and he just kind of brick shithouse wrestled chatted his way to a decision win. And that's kind of what I'm feeling like here in this fight as well. I feel like Shayla Nerdy and Becca is going to win more minutes in this fight by getting a takedown and being able to control Melquizel Costa while he burns minutes and looks for submissions in his guard. I think on the feet, it's relatively even. I don't trust either guy's chin all that much, but I think the more powerful shots will come from Shaylin Nerdy and Mbeke, but I do think Melquizel Costa is a better striker. So I do see this fight as a little bit of a 50-50 here. And in fights like this, I tend to just like to go with the underdog just because, but I do think Shaylin Nerdy and Mbeke has a fair few chances of being able to win this fight, whether it's TKO or decision, but I do think he's going to win a pretty close decision here, maybe 29-28 in a pretty close fight. We'll see though. Moving up to women's strawweight, Josephine Knudsen versus Julia Palastri. Um, this fight I've been debating on a little bit because uh, last weekend showed me that picking women's MMA is um, volatile to say the least. I was really thinking about picking an underdog pick in Julia Palastri here because she's got a little bit of reach, she's got a lot more output, and she's a finisher. But she does like to strike a little bit too much for me, and I think on defeat Josephine Knudsen is a much more technical kickboxer than Julia Palastri. I also think Josephine Knudsen's takedown defense will hold up, and I think she could get a takedown of her own. I don't think she'll need to get a takedown of her own here because honestly, I think Palastri's best way to win this fight is probably via submission. So I feel like Josephine Knudsen should just keep the fight on the feet, and I feel like she'll probably do that, and I feel like she's a better striker, and I think she'll probably win a decision here. But in me saying that and using my brain uh, and the research that I have done to pick this fight, Julia Plastri will probably win a split decision and get 30-27 on a judge's scorecard. Moving up to featherweight, Jekka Saragi versus Weston Wilson. For this fight, I believe I took a note. I did. There's Sergey right there. And I put fighting Weston Wilson, LOL, in all caps. Jekka Sergey should win this fight. If he doesn't, he should never be allowed to put on a pair of MMA gloves again. Weston Wilson, big guy for featherweight, he really is, but he's sub or bust, man, and all of his wins are against absolute nobodies. Jekka, however, is coming off of a gigantic knockout win over Lucas Alexander in the first round as like a plus 400. Ignore the loss to Jubilee. That's not important. Jekka, big power in his hands, dangerous guy. He should be able to beat Weston Wilson. Weston Wilson's 35, jiu-jitsu base. His record is just literally people who've never won a fight in their lives. He's coming off of another brutal KO. I gotta go with Jekka here, giving him the trifecta, the hat trick of brutal KO losses. Moving up to women's flyweight. Carly Judice versus Gabriela Fernandez. Guys, once again, I'm presented with some unranked women's MMA slop, and I don't know who's going to win this fight. I believe I have Gabriela Fernandez. I do, because I think she's fought better competition. I think overall she's just a better fighter. Carly Judice, I haven't seen really anything. She's got okay stand-up for unranked women's flyweight. That's what I can present you. Guys, if you have a quarter, just flip it. Who gives a fuck? I'm going with Gabriela Fernandez. I think she'll win a decision here. I think she's a little bit more composed. I think she has a little bit better stand up. And I think, you know, she's got a diverse set of finishes, pretty even spread of knockouts and submissions. I think she might be able to find the finish here. Losing to Jasmine Jasudavicius, I don't think is a horrible loss. Blutta also isn't absolute dog water. She has some UFC experience against some decent competition. I think she should be able to get a win here over Carly Judice in this fight. Whether that be decision, TKO, or submission, I feel like decision's most likely here. So I'm going to go with the Gabriela Fernandez decision win here over Carly Judice. Moving up to welterweight, Josh Quinlan versus Adam Fugitt. This is another one where I feel like I'm going against the grain. We'll see if it pays off for me, fellas. I'm going with Adam Fugitt here. And I wrote on the board, reach and takedown defense. Josh Quinlan's a guy who I think deals very badly with people who throw any kind of straight punch when they have more reach than him. It's like his brain doesn't compute what to do when somebody has more reach and they're just throwing straight punches at him. So he just kind of stands there and takes them. Now, this is a step down in competition for Josh Quinlan substantially. I don't think Adam Fugitt is God's gift to MMA or anything. But as far as Adam Fugitt goes, I don't mind the loss to Mike Mallet. Didn't take an insane amount of damage in that fight. He's 35, not the youngest guy in the world, but I think he'll be able to mix it up well enough on Josh Quinlan. He's got a little bit of a takedown. He's got decent striking. I like him being a southpaw. He's got the reach. And Josh Quinlan, I don't know if his confidence is going to be there. Now, Josh Quinlan's an explosive power puncher, very fast twitch guy, dangerous guy, good hooks. So there's always that variance that he just catches Fugitt and kills him instantly. We're very susceptible to being bonked in the head. But I genuinely think Adam Fugitt is a better mixed martial artist than Josh Quinlan. And Josh Quinlan is coming off of a brutal KO against Danny Barlow. He got dropped like 3 or 4 times in the finishing sequence. I mean, he took a fucking beating. He took a beating against Trey Waters too. He's coming off of 2 beatings. And I feel like his back's against the wall here. I'm not sure his confidence is going to be so high, especially coming into another guy who's bigger and longer than he is. Granted, Fugitt's going to be slower than a guy like Barlow, and he's not nearly as big as a guy like Waters. But I'm going to go with Adam Fugitt here. I think he may be able to squeak out a decision here, or maybe even a TKO. I think he might also be able to get Josh Quinlan to the ground as well if it comes to that. Confidence level in Mr. Fugitt, very low, but that just shows you how little I think of Josh Quinlan. Like, his only win in the UFC is a KO over... I think he only has 1 win in the UFC. Let me check. because I said one win and I could be wrong. He might have 2 wins in the UFC. No, he has 1 win over Jason Witt. 37-year-old Jason Witt. I don't know. I'm going with Adam Fugitt. Fuck it, I'm going with Adam Fugitt. Moving up to flyweight, Jimmy Flick versus Nate Maness. I'm going with Nate Maness here. Jimmy Flick is submission or bust, and quite frankly, Jimmy Flick was on his way to pretty dominantly losing that fight against Malcolm Gordon. It's just that Malcolm Gordon inside of his skull is just an empty chasm where our brain is supposed to be, and he got himself submitted. Jimmy Flick, good jiu-jitsu, good grappling, can positionally get it. He can find his way into a submission, and Nate Maness can be subbed, but I just think Nate Maness is going to be able to catch Jimmy Flick on the feet and put him out. Jimmy Flick, chin's not the best, almost put out by Malcolm Gordon, and I think Nate Maness is riding a little bit of momentum. Jimmy Flick is too, but Nate Maness is riding I think a little bit more. He beat a much better opponent in Mendoka, who I believe was undefeated at the time. I could be wrong. No, he was 10-1 at the time, not quite undefeated. Um, but yeah, he's coming off a win against a pretty good opponent. Jimmy Flick, not so much. I just think Nate Maness has all the upside here to get a TKO win over Jimmy Flick in this fight. Moving up to flyweight, here's a fight I'm really excited about. Tagir Ulanbekov versus Joshua Van. This is a sick fight, guys, but I hate to say it. I got a frowny face right there. I'm going with Tagir Ulanbekov over Joshua Van. I just think this is a little bit too much, a little bit too soon for Joshua Van. Tagir Ulanbekov is a guy who's pretty nice at everything. He's got good striking, good solid striking. He can go for 3 rounds hard. He can wrestle, and he has a nice submission threat. And Joshua Van's a guy who builds into fights. He normally takes the first round off a lot of the time. I'm not going to say he takes it off, but he's not at his peak. He kind of, I don't know, into the fight. His volume, his pace, his pressure elevates as the fight gets deeper. But Tagir Ulanbekov generally kind of keeps the same pace throughout the fight. And I just think he has too many weapons here against a young guy like Joshua Van. Tagir Ulanbekov is a guy who's fought a lot of talent at flyweight, beaten a lot of talent at flyweight. And Joshua Van, I mean, I've seen him taken down by guys who aren't that good, who aren't Tagir Ulanbekov. And you're giving Tagir Ulanbekov 5 inches of reach. I just don't like it for Joshua Van. I would love to see Joshua Van get an upset win here over Tagir Ulanbekov, maybe push the flyweight division forward a little bit. I love the prospects that we have on this card for flyweight. Van and Taira. Taira in the main event, obviously. But I feel like this is a hard fight for Joshua Van because Tagir Ulanbekov's too solid everywhere. Maybe Joshua Van finds the body a few times in the later rounds and really starts to mount an offense. It could happen. I could see it. But I just think Ulanbekov is going to be too much in the grappling. I think he's going to be able to take Joshua Van down, and I think he might actually get a submission win here over Joshua Van. And if he doesn't, I feel like he'll do enough in the first 2 rounds to probably get a decision over Joshua Van. Closing out the prelims at bantamweight, Brady Highstand versus Garrett Armfield. Guys, I'm going with Garrett Armfield. I'm going with Garrett Armfield here. Guys, his last win against Brad Katana really did impress me because I thought Brad Katana was just going to steamroll him with a pace, but Garrett Armfield developed cardio out of nowhere. Garrett Armfield was a guy who kind of gassed pretty hard as fights went on, and I thought a guy like Brad Katana, who's really got a consistent pace throughout the fight, would be able to melt him. No, sir. Garrett Armfield did his miles on the Airdyne bike. He's locked in. And if Garrett Armfield has good cardio, I really don't see a way Brady Highstand beats him. I just think Garrett Armfield's a little bit too much for him on the feet. I think he's a lot more dangerous. I think he has a lot more finishing potential on the feet than Brady Highstand does. Brady Highstand can push a pretty good pace, though, especially in the wrestling, but I just don't think it's going to be enough to stop Garrett Armfield right now. I think he's kind of finding his stride here at bantamweight right now. I think Brady Highstand is pretty good, and I think an upset is at the table here. But I'm going to go with Garrett Armfield here. I think he's going to get I think he's going to get a decision win here over Brady Highstand in a pretty competitive fight, I think. Because I think both of these guys are pretty well matched for each other. I think this is going to be a pretty slept on and pretty good fight. Moving up to the main card at flyweight, Asu Almabayev versus Jose Johnson. I don't like Asu Almabayev's line at minus 650, but I am picking him to win. Do I have any notes? Pace and the takedown. Jose Johnson's a guy who can be taken down and he can be held down. And man, Almabayev is really good at taking guys down. And once he gets you down, he will hold you there. Now, Jose Johnson does have a little bit of a submission threat. He's pretty nice at the sub. He's got nice striking. He's very big for the division. He's gigantic. 6 feet at flyweight is absolutely fucking outrageous. And there's a pretty good chance I think he'll probably miss weight. And if he does, I think his chances of winning go up a lot. Asu Almabayev, decent striking, just disgusting wrestling pace. And if Jose Johnson has a bad weight cut and his cardio's not there, man, he's going to get drowned if he doesn't find a way to get Almabayev out of there early, I think. I think the side has got to be Asu Almabayev here, unless you're playing just like a Hail Mary Jose Johnson submission or TKO. He could do it. But I just feel like Almabayev's going to smother him. I think Almabayev's probably going to give himself a submission win here over Jose Johnson. I think he's going to make him make a mistake, frustrate him with the wrestling and the pressure on top. And I think he'll probably lock in like an arm triangle or something over Jose Johnson here in this flyweight fight. Moving up to bantamweight, Douglas Silva de Andrade versus Miles Johns. It's another underdog. I feel like I'm picking so many underdogs on this card. I'm going with Douglas Silva de Andrade. Miles Johns' last performance against Cody Gibson was dog shit. It was an embarrassment of a performance. And because Cody Gibson looked like a senile grandfather out there looking for a fucking Denny's so he could get an early bird special, and Miles Johns couldn't finish him. If he can't finish that corpse of Cody Gibson, I don't think he's finishing Douglas Silva de Andrade. Andrade, hard fight for a lot of guys. Gave a lot of really skilled fighters a really hard fight. Not what I meant to do. I meant to pull up his record so I could illustrate that for you guys. Thank you. Cody Stamann win. Cody Stamann's solid. Losing to Said Nurmagomedov, not the end of the world. And losing to Lauren Murphy, up a weight class. You know, I don't think Miles Johns is on the level of the guys who are capable of beating Douglas Silva de Andrade. And I don't think he can outwork him in a 3-round fight. I don't think he can. I'm going to go with Douglas Silva de Andrade. I think he's going to win a decision here over Miles Johns. I think he's just a more skilled mixed martial artist. I don't think Miles Johns is going to find the finish. If he does, I'll be very impressed. But yeah, I think Andrade is just going to be able to outwork him over 3 rounds. Miles Johns tends to gas pretty hard. And if he's not fighting a KO shot over Cody Gibson throwing his head towards his fist, I don't think he's going to find it here. And I don't think he's going to get a decision over a guy who will actually throw strikes and output volume at him. So I'm going with Andrade's decision here. Moving up to featherweight, Timothy Kawamba versus Lucas Almeida. Lucas Almeida, pretty sizable dog here, which is surprising to me. I'm going with Timothy Kawamba here because he had a really good debut against Oki, who is up a weight class, and he's a very dangerous striker. Powerful guy, very nice jab, clean striking, and Kawamba took him to a pretty competitive decision, I would say. Lucas Almeida, last fight, flatlined by Andre Fili. Not the best look. And one thing I noticed in that fight, I picked Fili to win. Lucas Almeida, he looked noticeably just so much more stiff than I remember him being in the stand-up in that Fili fight. I remember thinking to myself in that fight, I'm like, the first thing that hits this guy is going to flatten him. Because his stand-up looked awkward. He looked tight. He looked stiff. He looked hesitant. And then he got KO'd. So I can only imagine how he's going to look coming into this fight. Lucas Almeida is a guy who really likes a dogfight, likes trading hooks in the pocket. He's very good at it, and he's very dangerous. Timothy Kawamba here, close fight against a guy who I also think has a lot of knockout abilities. but I think is a much sharper and much faster striker than Lucas Almeida, and that was up a weight class. So a guy with a lot more physicality advantage over Timothy Kawamba, and I think a lot more speed over his current opponent here. I think I'm just gonna go with a Timothy Kawamba decision here. I think he's just gonna be able to outwork Lucas Almeida with cleaner striking. We'll see though. I think Lucas Almeida KOs a pretty live straight here, but I'm not too confident in it, especially with how Lucas Almeida has looked lately, dropping losses to Pat Sabatini and like Andre Fili in the first round. I just don't like it that much, and I don't think his head's going to be in the right spot for this fight, but we'll see. Maybe he gets an upset. Moving up to middleweight, Ikram Aliskerov versus Antonio Tricoli. Um, Guys, you can see the line in this fight. I'll guess who I'm going with. I'm going with Ikram Aliskerov. Antonio Tricoli, submission or bust. Giant guy for the division. Um, but I mean, I don't think you're not going to submit one of these Dagestani wrestlers, brother. And the thing about Aliskerov is he's not just a wrestler. He's kind of got hands too. So he's a scary fella. I think Ikram Aliskerov is probably going to win this fight. I think via TKO, probably ground and pound. I think Tricoli might get what he wants, might get to play some guard, maybe look for a submission. I think he's going to get his head caved in, whether that's on the feet or on the ground. Um, I think even if he does latch up, maybe like a guillotine, I don't think Aliskerov's going to tap. I think he'll find a way out of most of the submission attempts of Antonio Tricoli. And I think on the feet, it's a wash. I feel like this is just a layup for Aliskerov, quite frankly. Um, yeah, Aliskerov TKO. That's what I'm going with. And closing out the card with our flyweight main event, Alex Perez versus Tatsuro Taira. Guys, this is a fight that I am very unsure about and very undecided on. Um, do I have anything on the board? I do. I actually have both of them on the board because I was kind of thinking about picking Perez as an underdog here, but I did end up deciding that I'm going to go with Tatsuro Taira here, and I'm going to tell you why. Now, I think Alex Perez is a very live dog. He's got a lot of experience. He's coming off of another main event win. This is his second main event, I believe, in the UFC. No, was his fight against Figueiredo a main event? I think it might have been. I don't remember. But I totally lost my train of thought. Alex Perez, I think he can win this fight as an underdog potentially because of his experience. His takedown defense looks pretty good against Muhammad Makayev in their fight, and his boxing looked pretty nice against Mateus Nicolau. I think those are all things that could potentially give him the edge here in this fight. Now, I think there's some differences though in the way a guy like Tatsuro Taira strikes and grapples compared to like a guy like Muhammad Makayev. I think that's the closest comparison a lot of guys are going to draw because, both Muhammad Makayev and Tatsuro Taira, undefeated prospects, and they're predominantly grapplers. I think Tatsuro Taira on the feet is a much better striker than Muhammad Makayev. I think he's got much cleaner striking. I think he's got more power for sure. I think he's got faster hands, and he throws straight punches pretty well. One thing I noted about Tatsuro Taira and a lot of his strikes, timing. He's got good timing. He's able to throw strikes through people's guards at the right time to catch them. Just like in his last fight where he got a round 2 TKO over Carlos Hernandez, who is a guy who's not exactly the easiest guy in the world to KO. 12 fights, he only has 1 KO loss. Also, that should be a TKO over Dennis Bondar, but I'm not even going to get into that. Flatlined Carlos Hernandez with a beautiful right hand straight right to the face, finished him with ground and pound, perfectly timed shot right through the guard. I just feel like the striking of Taira is a level above a guy like Muhammad Makayev. And once again, I think the timing of his takedowns are going to be what separates him from Makayev. Because Makayev's a guy, he just spams him. He's just double leg. Doesn't work, double leg. Didn't work, double leg. Didn't work, double leg. So Alex Perez was just like, well, I'm just going to fucking sprawl. I'm just going to spam sprawl because he's going to spam double leg. Taira's kind of a guy, he waits to see what you're going to do. You present him something, maybe you square up your hips for a second, he slips a shot, and then he's under. It's a lot harder to defend because he doesn't spam it quite so much. And another thing is position. Tatsuro Taira is pretty good at getting a dominant position, and once he gets there, he either stays there or he finishes the fight. Now, it's against a lower level of competition than a guy like Alex Perez would have fought, but I think he can find good positions in the grappling against Alex Perez here in this fight. I really do. Um, that's why I'm leaning Taira, man. I think this is a close fight. I think, as far as I'm concerned, I think the odds should be a pick'em. But another thing, it's an intangible that I want to mention. Alex Perez coming off of a main event win against Matheus Nicolau, and he's going to be confident. He's active. He's been looking good. I think he's going to be confident here in this fight. I think that actually is going to be to his detriment, because there's been some times in his career where he's been a little bit too ahead of himself and jumped the gun a little bit early and gotten himself submitted early. And I think that could potentially rear its head in this fight, because Taira's a guy, you give him a sub, he's going to snatch it, especially early when you're dry. So that's just another reason why I'm kind of leaning Taira. Another thing in the Matheus Nicolau fight, although he did KO Nicolau, a lot of his shots that he was throwing in the boxing in that finishing sequence, very wide looping hooks, like barely even a bend in the elbow coming over. And Taira, in my head, it's playing that straight right hand against Carlos Hernandez, that piston. He threw a piss missile right to his chin with that straight right. If Perez loops big hooks like that and Taira plants and throws that straight right, I think he could hurt him. And if it doesn't hurt him, I think he could use it as a beautiful entry for a takedown. And I think he'd probably get it, because once again, I think Tatsuro Taira has pretty good timing. But yeah, I think I'm gonna go with Tatsuro Taira here. I think he's gonna get a submission over Alex Perez, but we'll see though. I think Perez is a very live dog. His boxing's good, his power's good, his takedown defense is good. He's got the sub of his own, by the way. I'll mention that as well. And he's got a litany of experience at the highest level. So I think this is a really exciting main event, honestly. I think this is a main event that's going to be exciting to see. And then we'll see if we get a prospect that's really making their way into the top 5 with Tatsuro Taira here. I would like him to win, but we'll see though. I think this is a great fight. But oh, another thing, Tatsuro Taira, big reach advantage. So I think the straight punches will be to his benefit here. But yeah, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. As always, see ya.